Sometimes people ask, what is your most vivid memory of Dorothy? It's a real easy answer. Many times, just gazing at her praying, on her knees. Sometimes reading from the Missal, sometimes reading from the New Testament, sometimes reading from some other part of the Bible, sometimes going through her lists, her long lists of people to pray for, the living and the dead, and she had a special devotion to praying for people who'd committed suicide. You know, she went to Mass every day, and when she got too feeble to go to Mass every day, Mass came to her. She received communion every day at the Catholic Worker at Mary House. She prayed the Rosary daily. She went to confession once a week. I mean, she was this kind of dinosaur Catholic who did all the things that Catholics thought they were supposed to do. She did them. And she did them with not just kind of forward march kind of discipline. She loved doing them. She even loved confession, difficult as it was. And the opening sentences of The Long Loneliness describe the process of preparing for confession, because she looked at the writing of an autobiography as a kind of confession. You know, so it's an amazing life, for both in terms of its social impact and its spiritual foundations, without which, Dorothy insisted many times in many words, everything she did would have been totally impossible. She burned out in 20 minutes or 20 weeks, but certainly not long. Not long. You cannot take this kind of life if you don't have a spiritual life. When you look back on the roots of a religious conversion, you always discover they go much deeper than you could. You keep finding deeper and deeper roots. Dorothy describes this praying the Our Father in school as a very little girl, and watching her breath condense and dry up and condense and dry up on the surface of the desk while she was praying. This is part of her religious memory. The Our Father and this breathing in, breathing out, breathing in, breathing out, breathing in, breathing out, the Our Father. She was drawn into the Episcopal Church as a very young person. Her parents were not interested, but the priest had come around knocking on people's doors and inviting them to come. Said, well, if the kids want to come, they're welcome to do so. And the kids did want to go. So, and that was a very important part of her religious formation, although, as often happens in one's adolescent years, you look back on that with disdain. But in fact, it remains with you. And there were prayers from the Book of Common Prayer that were part of Dorothy's spiritual life for the rest of her life. And when she was in prison in 1917, for the first time with the suffragettes, they were treated very badly at first, until the president intervened. Wilson freed them by presidential order. She was finally able to get a Bible. She asked for and at last received a Bible, and that was her food. They were fasting. That was her food. And she writes very poignantly and beautifully. She's a great writer. Read The Long Loneliness, and you will see. I would put it up there with, one of the great autobiographies of the 20th century, Long Loneliness by Dorothy Day. And it is a record of her kind. It's a little bit like St. Augustine's Confessions. It's a work of literature that describes very powerfully those little things, which when you string them together, go somewhere. If you find the Catholic Worker at all attractive, it's something you can go to for, an hour, and that's enough. Or something I remember Stanley Wisniewski, whose picture is hanging in Phil Runkle's cubicle just behind that wall. Stanley Wisniewski had come in 1935, as I recall, 1934, to visit the Catholic Worker, and never left, saying, I'm still just a visitor. He lived there for the rest of his life. And Stanley would joke that there are some people who come into the Catholic Worker and announce immediately, I'm here for life, and they're gone within 48 hours, and others who are still visiting and have been there for years. But you can go in for just a little while, and if that Catholic Worker community doesn't fit you, but you're still interested in the basic idea, you might try another Catholic Worker community. There's no two alike. And some of them, I'd have to say, Dorothy Day, if she started opening her mouth and talking about some subjects, wouldn't be that welcome. She wouldn't be for women's ordination, for example. She preferred the Latin Mass to the English one, although she adjusted to the English Mass. She was in some ways, I said it, a Catholic dinosaur. She was a unique item. And each Catholic Worker house reflects or doesn't reflect certain aspects of her understanding of the gospel. And some call themselves Catholic Worker houses, and they're not even Catholic, but they have some sense of connection with a Catholic worker. So that you can do that. After all, the first part of your life is mostly trying things on for size and seeing to what extent they fit. and keep hunting. And like Dorothy Day, maybe it'll take years and years. Dorothy was baptized in 1926, and the Catholic work was founded in 1933. And between those two dates, May 1st, 1933, and the 29th of December, 1926, she was searching. And what she found was what she founded. Dorothy, once she got her bearings, she bore with those bearings for the long haul. She was a real stubborn person. She would certainly continue to believe that war is not a Christian activity, as did the early church. She would do what she could to encourage, particularly Catholics, to find alternative ways of dealing with the problem of evil in the world. She wasn't a pacifist. She was a pacifist. Pacifist comes from the Latin word pax. Means peacemaker. Peacemaking is a very mysterious process in which we experiment with making the world slightly better rather than slightly worse. And that's what she would be interested in, how people are doing that. She would have, if somebody had come up with her before she gave a talk and shown her this button and been given it, she would be wearing it, because she believed that working people were not being treated well enough. And she very much identified with their struggles for better working conditions, the right to bargain, et cetera, she'd still be doing that. She'd be here in Wisconsin, probably taking part in that march last, was it Sunday afternoon? She'd been out with the women yesterday, protesting rape. She would respond to what people were doing insofar as she could see some connection with what she believed. And if they didn't, she'd just quietly decline. She'd be writing if she still had one thing she worried about is in her old age she'd lose her ability to write, but she didn't. It was very simple writing at the end, very simple journal keeping in very small letters, but she managed to keep writing right to the last day. And that was a relief to her. So she'd still be writing and would still be interesting. There were important people in the Catholic Church who didn't think highly of the Catholic worker. I'm not just talking about bishops, but major donors who felt irritated by some of the things Dorothy's newspaper had to say. And some called her, Moscow Mary, and accused her of being, working under orders of Moscow and all that kind of thing. So they weren't calling her Saint Dorothy.